hymns to God, and the other prisoners them. In the same Paul wrote to the Ephesians and to the Colossians, sing psalms, hymns, and sacred songs to God with thanksgiving in your hearts. From the writings of the Apostle Paul, we know that Christian song was both an instrument of praise to God and also a tool for teaching.
So the first of the hymns we're going to look at is number 298, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. Of all the cross hymns we sing, this one sort of catches the paradox of horror on the one side and hope on the other. And there was a medieval painting that portrayed angels flying all around the cross, holding little cups. And the purpose was, as the hymn states, sorrow and love flowing down. They're trying to catch all the tears and the sorrow of the love flowing down from the cross. And Isaac Watts was a composer. We think there are some pretty intelligent people in our Christian heritage. Isaac Watts, when he was 5 years old, learned Latin. At 9, he learned Greek. At 11, he learned French. And at 13, he learned Hebrew. Wow. There were many of us in seminary who could never master either Hebrew or Greek. And yet, here's Isaac Watts at this young age, a really, really intelligent young man. He's 18 years old. So you can imagine he's inquisitive and he's full of critiques. And he complained because the hymns in the Anglican Church were so terrible. And back in the day, John, you'll remember that they didn't sing hymns like we sing them today. There was a deacon up front, and there was what was called lining a hymn. Yeah. So the deacon would read the words, and then the congregation would sing, and then the deacon would go on to the next stanza and repeat this over and over again. And they didn't have the freelance hymns that we have today, so they basically sang the psalms. So anyway, Isaac complained. His father was a clergyman, and you can just imagine they went home after church for noontime meal on Sunday, and he lays it all out on the dining room table, and he says, you know, these hymns bleep. You know, they're just, I can't take going to church because the congregation just drones on and there's nothing really exciting about all this. So Dad, being the wise guy that he was, says, okay, Isaac, guess what? Why don't you write your own hymn? So Isaac did. He wrote his first hymn, and before the Sunday evening service began, because they had multiple church services in those days, Isaac Watts had his first hymn all written, and they sang it that night. I found where someone described what Isaac Watts looked like. This is not a flattering picture. He was 5 feet tall, with a large head, made even bigger by a huge wig, and with a hooked nose and a frail and sickly body. As a young man, he had proposed to a lovely lady. In refusing, she said, I like the jewel, but not the setting. Oh, talk about being rejected. So for the next 2 years, Isaac Watts wrote a new hymn for every single Sunday of the year, and ultimately wrote something around 600 hymns. And we know some of the others, Oh God, Our Help in Ages Past, Joy to the World, which sometimes we sing at Easter and not just Christmas. Yeah. But this was a bold departure from the traditional Psalms, and he was considered to be a very radical churchman of his day. So his hymn kind of reached a pinnacle in this particular hymn, and it was based on Paul's words to the Galatians. And Charles Wesley, who was no second-rate hymn writer himself, having written somewhere around 6,500 compositions, said he would have traded all of his hymns to have been the author of this one hymn. I think that was a very generous statement on his part, because Charles Wesley wrote a lot of really, really good stuff, even though we don't sing it at annual conference anymore. But anyway, Charles Wesley wrote some great stuff, but he was willing to trade it all because he held this hymn in such high esteem. So Jane and John, let's sing first verse and 4. 1 and 4.
1 and 4? Okay. Let me just do an intro.
So Jesus, keep me near the cross. Fanny Crosby. She wrote more than 8,000 hymns, so she outdistanced Charles Wesley. She was labeled by some as the Protestant saint. At 6 weeks old, she suffered an eye infection that was improperly treated by a doctor here in Upper New York State. I've always tried to find the particular town or village, but I've not been successful, except that it was a doctor in upstate New York, and that misdiagnosis and treatment led her to permanent blindness. She was blind the rest of her life. And she was more gracious than we might have been, and she said, "Don't blame the doctor. If I could meet him, I would tell him that he unwittingly did me the greatest favor in the world." And she testified that her powers of concentration came from her blindness, as did also her extraordinary memory. So we know that sometimes when you don't have one sense, that other senses become able to adjust and be magnified by that. So when she was 10 years old, she wrote, "Oh, what a happy child am I, although I cannot see. I am resolved that in this world contented I will be. How many blessings I enjoy that other people don't. To weep and sigh because I'm blind, I cannot and I won't." In all her adult life, she lived in New York City, in an area called the Bowery. Poverty-stricken, slums, factories, shops, and streets. And she went to all these places, very reminiscent of what John Wesley had earlier done in England. And she visited the nearby rescue mission nightly to lead worship services. And she reached the age of 41 before she wrote her first hymn. And remember, Isaac Watts was 18 when he wrote his first hymn. She didn't write her first hymn until she was 41 years of age. And it led to an endless stream of songs. And guess what? She got paid $2 for each of her hymns. Now, I know there's inflation, but I wonder if she was shortchanged for her hymns. And we know some of her others, "Rescue the Perishing" and "Blessed Assurance," we sing a lot in our churches. So this was Fanny Crosby, and Jesus, keep me near the cross. Let's do stanza 1.
Okay, are we going to do Were You There after? Or that was before this?
Yeah, we were supposed to do Were You There?
Okay, let me do that.
We can do that next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold on.
Jane's got her music already for Were You There?
No, I had both.
Jesus creeping near the cross, where the precious fountain, free to all the healing stream, flows from Calvary's fountain. In the cross, in thy glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river.
Well, we sing a lot of Fanny Crosby, and every once in a while in my career, I've taken a composer and made it into a sermon, and then all of our music that morning has been about that person, written by that person. So one of these days, I want to do Fanny Crosby.
Yeah, right.
Because she was a very colorful little individual.
She was.
You know, imagine as small in stature as she was, standing before Congress and the state legislator
Yeah.
and giving them a piece of her mind. A pretty remarkable lady.
She collaborated with a lot of excellent musicians also. Well, you said she was in New York City, wasn't she?
Yes, yes,
So that probably was
yeah,
a good place for her to be,
yeah,
with her gift and the gift of others.
yeah.
And many of the people that did collaborate with her wrote like 50 hymns with her.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because William Doan. wrote
William
music
Doan, yeah.
for
Yeah.
a bunch of
William, yeah, yeah.
We forget that in the hymnal, there's a lot of information on the page other than just the hymn. You can read the bard, you can see the composer, you
Yeah.
can
Oh,
see the
yeah.
person who wrote the music,
Right,
you
right.
can see the meter,
And
you
the
can say
date.
the name of the tune, the year it was written, and all kinds of stuff.
Right,
And then in
yeah.
the back, there are tables
Yeah,
back
yeah.
there that even tell you more.
Yeah.
But I've got some great hymn books at home that I can always reference to get some information, but someday I'll learn where Fanny Crosby was.
Yeah, we'll have to
Yeah,
Oh, that
maybe
would
she
be
was right here at
interesting.
Chittenango and it was a
Yeah.
doctor
Yeah.
here. Were you there? Well, this piece of music is an African-American spiritual. It's passionate. It's a dramatic retelling of Jesus' death and resurrection. It's kind of an unforgettable piece of music. The music is slow and it's majestic and it constantly repeats phrases. And we're sort of led step by step through this agonizing ordeal that Jesus experienced. And it's not at all surprising that the people who experienced the tragedy of American slavery could so identify with this particular hymn. And one of the phrases is, when the sun refused to shine. And that was as true in their respective lives as it was in the life of Jesus. And so we constantly repeat, trembling, trembling, trembling. And the torture becomes tangible, and death becomes heavy, and grief overwhelms. And I can so clearly remember John and Jane Harlan London at Rockefeller Church, who was an African American and a great singer in his own right. He was retired from Syracuse University, but was a regular in our church services. And Harlan would sing these spirituals. Mm-hmm. It's about the only thing I remember that Harlan sang. I mean, the repertoire of spirituals is so broad. Mm-hmm. And I remember he would sing this, and you just sat there tingling from head to toe as he sang these particular songs. But one of the things I learned is that the final stanza is not in our hymnal.
Really?
I don't know why that is, because it ends, were you there when they laid him in the tomb, and then repeats itself. But the next stanza reads, did you know he is risen from the dead? Did you know he is risen from the dead? Oh, sometimes I want to shout, glory, glory, glory. Did you know he is risen from the dead? Why would that be
Left out.
omitted? I don't know if it's some copyright issue or what, but one would think that that would be the perfect closing stanza and not
Right.
how it ends here. Although, to be fair, it's sort of a Good Friday hymn, so we aren't quite to Easter yet, but it just strikes me that of all the hymns where there might be an omission, it was in this one. So let's just do one and see where we are then.
What number?
It's 288
Yeah, and what
and
verse?
stanza 1.
Just the one? Okay.
Well, we don't have a Good Friday service here. That probably would be a Good Friday hymn
Yeah.
were we to have a service here. Although, John, I remember once in my time here, we did have the ecumenical service here on a Friday. I think maybe it was noontime, and you were the guest soloist
What's that?
that morning, and the mayor of Chittenango spoke.
Yeah, I think I remember. I think I was here.
No, Mick, would it be Mick's son?
Oh. Mick Capel?
Yeah. Would it be his son who was mayor, or was his
No, he
dad?
wasn't mayor, he wasn't mayor,
No, Mick wasn't mayor, no.
no, but,
Somebody in his family was?
no. I'm trying to think of his name, I see his face, but I can't think of his name. He went to school with.
He was a layperson,
Yeah.
and it probably, of all the Good Friday services I've gone to in this village, he was the greatest preacher of the whole bunch. He was outstanding, but somehow he's related to the family. You'll have to research that for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay. So, John, you were gonna sing, what Wondrous Love is this?
Yeah, I was gonna do it as a benediction.
Okay, all right, okay, good. So, 295. We probably all watched mesmerized at the collapse of the World Trade Center, the terrorist attacks of 9/11, and immediately thereafter, workers excavating the site found a cross-shaped beam standing upright in all the ruins and the debris. And in the days thereafter, it became a makeshift place of worship right there amidst it all. And the picture of this cross amongst all the rubble was published all around the world, and it was a kind of a symbol of hope at the time. Well, long before that, there was a man named John Bowring, and he visited a small Chinese seaport, and he was very much impressed by the sight of a bronze cross that was towering above the ruins of a large cathedral. And this cathedral had been built years earlier by Portuguese colonists, but it had been destroyed by a typhoon, except for one remaining wall, and on the top of that wall was this cross. And it so impressed him that eventually it served as an inspiration for this particular hymn. And actually his grave marker reads, "In the cross of Christ I glory." The hymn in itself is worthy of note, but also the music, because there was a guy named Ithamar Conkey. Ithamar, what a first name that was. I wonder how they shortened that or what his nickname might have been. Ithamar. He was organist and choirmaster at Central Baptist Church in Norwich, Connecticut. And on a very rainy Sunday morning in 1849, only one choir member appeared for the morning service. Well, Conkey was so displeased with his choir's unfaithfulness that he finished the prelude, closed and locked the organ, and went home. Out of here! I can't see Shirley doing that, or any other organist that I know. But this guy thought, okay, enough.
Yeah.
Locks the organ. So even if you had a substitute organist, might not have been able to access it. Locks the organ, and he's out of here. Well, he was remorseful, hopefully. He was remorseful that afternoon. So he recalled that one of the hymns that he was going to play that morning was John Bowery's In the Cross of Christ I Glory. And so as his penance before the evening service, Conkey composed a new hymn tune for this text, and he named it Rathbun, after the one faithful choir member who had shown up that Sunday morning. So if you look at the bottom of that page, you should be able to. No, the tune over to the right is Rathbun.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Oh my
long
gosh.
live Rathbun for showing up on that rainy Sunday morning during Lent. Notice this is one of those hymns where the first and the last stanza is the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you come across a hymn where
Yeah.
that's the case. So let's do stanza 1. We sang that a couple of weeks ago, didn't? Were you organist that morning,
I
Jay?
don't think
No?
so.
Yeah, I think that was our opening hymn.
Bowering also wrote Watchmen Tell Us of the Night,
Ah,
Oh,
which is a nice hymn. I'm sure he wrote other really good hymns.
yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
another one of his top.
Well, when we talk about the cross, I used to listen to radio station WMHR.
oh, right.
I like their music. Some of the other stuff, I don't, one way or the other. But the music I always appreciated. But I got to thinking, they sing a lot of hymns that have to do with a cross. And, they're not bubbly and they're not, they just don't do everything I want them to do. And so I would have a tendency to be very critical of their music because of the narrow focus. And yet, that's exactly what the New Testament was. Because prior to the Gospels being written, the Passion narrative, all the suffering of Jesus and Holy Week and so forth, that circulated as the first original written document, apart from the other things that were in the Gospels. The teachings and the healings and so forth, they came later in the Gospels. But the very first document that made its way around had to do with the cross, and the cross only. So for all my critiquing of WMHR, in some ways they really are right. But sometimes singing about the cross all the time can get a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
So there's other great music out there.
Yeah.
But they have it right, and so I try to be much more charitable in my evaluation of WMHR. So Beneath the Cross of Jesus, there's not too much known about this particular hymn. It was written by Elizabeth Cleffin, who was born in Edinburgh in the year 1830, and her father was a sheriff there in Edinburgh. And she died when she was 39 years old. She never lived to hear this hymn that she wrote, and to know that it really did bring comfort to innumerable persons. Her original poem consisted of 5 stanzas, but today only 3, as we see, are used in most hymnals, not just ours, but other hymnals you would still find as the first three stanzas. So let's again do stanza 1.
I think it's a song, it's not a hymn, right?
It's a solo or?
Yeah, it's a solo.
What do you want to sing?
We're gonna have to look it up.
Yeah.
Little research.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's ever been in one of our hymnals in my time.
Yeah,
Right, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, but I know that song. Yeah. Well, 504. Would you say that if we asked the question, what would be the one Lenten hymn that you would remember the most? That it likely would be the Old Rugged Cross. I told this story, I think, Ash Wednesday, but not all of you were there, that at First Church downtown, which was this magnificent marble, brick, stone structure that still stands majestically right opposite the courthouse and the public safety building.
Yeah.
It's sort of shaped in an oval if you had a drone up above. And when I first went there, they had postcards, the picture taken from above. And it was nicknamed the Church of the Canned Ham because looking at it from above, it was the shape of, remember the old canned ham with a little key?
Yeah.
You used to yeah. And so we had a wonderful sanctuary. It was a sloped floor with theater seats. And then up front was this magnificent, the pulpit you went up steps into. And when you walked into that pulpit, you felt all the pressure of the previous pastor greats who had preached magnificent sermons. And then there was a large, one of the best pipe organs in the whole downtown, and all the pipes were up there, and the balcony with the choir in front. So that was the setting. And so there was a big grand piano at the floor level. And the organist said to me, in fact, the organist was Greg Keefe, and Gilly's scholarship was in memory of Greg.
him. Yes.
So anyway, Greg said, would you mind if we did the closing hymn around the grand piano? I mean, Greg's a professional musician. Who am I to say no? I have other things that I can do, but I'm not going to tell him where the choir should sing. So the choir recessed down from the balcony, and they all got around the grand piano. And that was the closing hymn for the congregation, everybody standing and singing. And I looked from where I was standing over, and I see somebody reaching for a handkerchief, somebody else for a Kleenex, somebody else with tears coming down their cheek, and I thought, what have I caused here? So as it turns out, following up afterwards, a couple of these folks remember back in their childhood being at their grandparents who had a piano maybe in the living room or the family room, and they used to gather around the piano and sing the hymns.
Yeah.
And the Old Rugged Cross was one of those hymns that they used to sing. So anyway, the times when we had worship services at the Grand, I don't think they've ever been reinstituted, but we used to rotate, the pastors did. And Jane, you played many times over there, 2:30 in the afternoon on Sunday, and they would, wheelchair everybody into the big dining area there. You generally had 3 sections. The section up front, they were awake and stayed awake. The section in the middle, they were kind of out of it when they came, or were alert when they came, and then as the service progressed, kind of like dozed away. The people in the last row, they were out of it from the moment they came in to the moment they left. But anyway, we'd ask for, favorite hymns, had a little songbook there, and invariably, there had to be 150 songs. Invariably, the one that was the most popular of all was the Old Rugged Cross. And some of them didn't sing at all. Some of them didn't sing much. Some of them just didn't sing very well at all. But when we sang the Old Rugged Cross, they knew that one. And that was a better response than any other piece of music we used to do. So anyway, this was written by a fellow who came into the ministry through the Salvation Army. And his dad had died. George Bernard's dad had died. And he was going to go into the ministry, George was. But when his father died, he had to take care of his mother and his siblings and so forth. And that's an oft-repeated story through history where, that happens. And so instead of going on to theological school, he worked by day, and he devoted his spare time to books and to writing and so forth. And so he was the one that composed this hymn. And George Beverly Shea, you remember from Billy Graham fame, recalls meeting this George Barnard at a Bible conference in Indiana. And his quote was, "Though a good preacher, he would sometimes sing." He would sing his sermon.
Oh, wow.
Don't even think.
Don't get any ideas, huh?
And Susan will remember a colleague of mine named Eli Whitney. Eli served the Emmanuel United Methodist Church in Camillus on Casson Road. It had a big bell tower separate in front and got nicknamed the Ding Dong Church. So anyway, Eli was the pastor. He substituted for me one Sunday morning. Eli did 2 things that morning. He sang his sermon, which everybody thought was okay. The other thing he did that wasn't okay is he had a pet parrot. And he brought the parrot along. And the parrot was perched right on the edge of the pulpit. And the parrot apparently, different times during the music, thought he would sing along. Well, the only thing I can remember when I went back and said, well, how did it go? They said, well, Eli was fine, but we told him to leave his parrot at home the next time. So Eli was the only pastor I ever knew who sang a sermon. And this fellow was known for doing the same. So the Old Rugged Cross, let's see, how about the first and the last verses, 1 and 5?
Okay.
For
Well, composers took liberties, poetic license, we might call it. So when we sing "On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross," we're making reference to Jesus and the crucifixion, but it was not "on a hill far away stood an old rugged cross." That's the romantic perception of this hymn, and many folks who sit in the pews think likewise. Roman crucifixions took place right at curbside. When Jesus was a boy and living in Galilee, there was a fellow named Judas the Galilean who led a revolt against Rome. And it was crushed very badly and very quickly. And Rome's idea of discouraging others from doing the same was to put the crosses right at the curbside. And this was a reminder for everybody who walked from point A to point B. This is what's going to happen if you challenge the Roman government. So anyway, the composers can and do take political license. It's a lovely hymn, but literally is not exactly the way it happened.
Yeah.
And in my Sunday night class, we make reference sometimes to a magazine I get called Biblical Archaeology, where now some of the findings are saying that maybe Jesus was not nailed to the cross, maybe he was attached to the cross via some kind of rope kind of thing. And now they're doing research as to where nails were first found in the ground and so forth and so forth. So, on the one hand, we keep these traditions, but on the other hand, sometimes they're not exactly as we may sing or we may read. And you can do some of those same things with the Christmas story, but there's a setting to do that and a setting not to do that. So anyway, so the last one is 159, Lift High the Cross. We just sang that on Palm Sunday, and one of the reasons we sing it is not because it's the greatest hymn for Palm Sunday, but because in our hymnal there's a dearth of good Palm Sunday hymns. There just isn't much. So it's hard to pick music for Palm Sunday, and I think my responsibilities, Palm Sunday is the most difficult Sunday of the entire year to preach on, because it has underlying currents that might not exist other places and other times. So we sing Lift High the Cross almost as a default because we can't find anything else. Good a hymn as it may be, but we can sing Lift High the Cross any time through the Christian year. And it was sung during the Crusades. Christian warriors, remember, emblazoned a cross on each of their shields and their armor. So when they went into battle, here was the cross right on all of their military equipment. And going even further back to the Emperor Constantine, when he defeated his foes to gain the throne, he looked up into the heavens and remember he saw a vision, a cross. And that vision then became painted on the soldiers' battle gear. And in the church's early decades, there were skeptics who so scoffed at all of this, including the crucified Lord, that archaeologists have discovered graffiti in Rome depicting a crucified donkey, mocking Jesus and the crucifixion and the cross. So anyway, Lift High the Cross, it's one of my more favorite songs. Not my favorite, but it ranks, up there above the middle. So let's just sing, looking at the time, let's just sing one stanzas.
Triumphant sign
And Glenda, you have our closing prayer, and then John is going to sing the benediction.
Okay. Oh, holy and loving God, we are people who love music. We wrap our faith in the lyrics and melodies, the tones and the tunes that magnify your holy word. Gratefully, we are you too for the good company of artists, poets, and composers, for those that sing and play for us and with us as we witness your splendor. For all these assists on our respective faith journeys, we have our praise and thanksgiving, for you are the everlasting one whose grace and blessings are first offered to us. Amen.
The benediction that I'm going to sing, I sang it as a solo the first Sunday in Lent here, and I think first of all, it's a wonderful hymn. It's called "Oh, What Wondrous Love Is This," and it's an American traditional melody. I'm just going to do the first verse, but if I could read it, the words are just so compelling and appropriate for this time of year. What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, for my soul? To bear the dreadful curse for my soul. So.
Glenda sends out the bulletins every Thursday. And one of the things Glenda does is print the words to each of the hymns. And as we go through the process, starting with me and then through Glenda and so forth, it is amazing that when you are paying attention to the words and not in the midst of the music, that you see and read and feel things that you don't otherwise maybe on a Sunday morning. You just, you go with the music. So even though that's extra effort to do that, it's a great reminder that, again, our theology is in our hymns and our music. So, anyway. Well, thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.